Appearance on Dion's Daily Dose does not imply endorsement from or by any candidate or guest. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by Dion Bergeron or Dion's Daily Dose are his own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of any guest. Material and information presented is for general information purposes only. The Dion's Daily Dose name in all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owners, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Dion's Daily Dose.
All right, welcome to Dion's Daily Dose. I'm Dion.
And I'm Shawn.
And today we are going to be talking about Trump's plans to reform the Fed if reelected. Now, apparently, this came from inside the Trump camp somewhere, and it was not an official release by Trump's campaign.
I think it was a leak, but also the media has been known to lie, so they could be lying about this. But he did have problems with leaking during his administration.
He had massive problems with leaking. His administration leaked like a sieve, man. It was all over. And of course, we now know that it was intentional from the start. I mean, his administration was filled with moles, intentionally planted, intentionally gone. But now we're talking about.
I think it's also they did this because his poll numbers, because this might chase away some people.
It might scare off some voters. Let's kind of get into it though.
Okay.
And see what they're saying. There are some interesting things in this, right?
Yep.
Let's take a look. So Trump's potential plan for Fed raises alarms. Former President Trump's potential plan to exert more influence over the Federal Reserve is alarming experts and investors. The Wall Street Journal reported Thursday that a group of Trump allies is crafting ways to chip away at the independence of the central bank, a constant thorn in the side of the former president, should he be reelected in November. They also argue Trump would have the power to oust Fed Chair Jerome Powell, whom he appointed to the job in 2017 and then berated through most of his term, despite legal protections from being fired without cause.
And he really didn't want Jerome Powell.
Yeah,
but he was just kind of forced into it.
Yeah, and that's something that I believe might need some looking at, because once again, we're looking at Nixon and his VP when Agnew was removed. They didn't give him a choice about who his VP was gonna be.
And the Federal Reserve has certain rules where you have to pick somebody from their list to be able to.
The Federal Reserve is the most corrupt arm, extension, whatever you want to call it, and we have no power over it. No. It's a completely separate entity. It's part of the central bank. Our money is not our own. No. It's loaned to us, and it's ridiculous, but it's more than we can get into right now.
It's unconstitutional.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The Fed is a criminal organization. So,
and I wish we could get an audit. Wish we could get an audit.
Right. The campaign, going back to the article, the campaign has distanced itself from the plan, and it would face serious obstacles in Congress, where Trump's previous efforts to sway the Fed in his favor fell flat. Let's finish up before we dive in. During his first term, Senate Republicans rejected 3 of Trump's nominees to the Fed over concerns about their credentials and independence, which is hilarious, I might add.
They always talk about every time you're trying to get like an audit or something through Congress, that's one of the talking points they always talk about, that we need to keep the Federal Reserve independent, which is crazy.
No, we actually don't want the Federal Reserve independent. No. We want the Fed, the Federal Reserve itself, we want it under our control is what we want. But back to the article. And several senators told the Wall Street Journal they would oppose the campaign's potential plan for a second term. Of course they are. Everybody's going to oppose anything Trump, even if it's the greatest thing in the world. Even if Trump said we should all drink more water, they would say water is toxic for you. Even so, experts say Trump's attempts could seriously harm the U.S. and its role as the center of the financial world. Dum, dum.
Another talking point.
Yes. Quote, if it becomes clear that there's going to be a Fed chair that answers to the president, I would expect a dramatic reaction in the markets, and the White House would have to deal with that, said Ian Katz, director at research consultancy Capital Alpha Partners. Oh, that's not a suspicious ass name if I've ever heard one. Quote, there are plenty of people in the markets who would like to see Trump be president again. I don't think there are plenty of people in the markets who would like to see Trump be de facto Fed chair. I beg to differ. I do. I beg to differ because I think one of the most effective uses for presidential power would be to yank the Federal Reserve back under governmental control.
Or have Rand Paul be the Fed chair.
Right? I'd be down for that. The Trump campaign declined to provide the Hill with a copy of the plan obtained by the Journal and said it should not be considered an official position. Quote, let us be very specific here. Unless a message is coming directly from President Trump or an authorized member of his campaign team, no aspect of future presidential staffing or policy announcements should be deemed official, the Trump campaign said in a statement. Once again, confirming somebody released this without authorization. It may or may not be accurate. We're not going to speak to it, which I think is the best plan.
It is. He has such a problem with leaks.
Oh, my God. Okay, so the article goes on. The Fed is a politically independent agency run by a board of governors appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. The president also selects governors to serve as chair, vice chair, and vice chair of supervision, roles that also require Senate confirmation. The president, however, has no legal power over the decisions of the FOMC, or Federal Open Market Committee, the panel of Fed board members and regional bank chiefs responsible for setting interest rates. Fed chiefs have been particularly averse to presidential influence since the Nixon administration, when then Fed Chair Arthur Burns held off on raising interest rates under White House pressure despite rampant inflation. Under the U.S. system, quote, you have a certain confidence that the president of the country can't just pick up the phone, jawbone the Fed chair into lowering interest rates when perhaps that isn't the sound economic decision to make at that moment, Katz said. Basically, we don't want the president involved in the Fed, but the problem is nobody's involved in the Fed. This governing board is a joke.
Also, which is crazy to me, is the Federal Reserve is talking about cutting interest rates again.
Right.
And with all this inflation, that's the last thing you want to do.
It has to be intentional. Here's the thing. The destruction of the nation's economy, the rampant inflation, the crackdowns on various energy production, there's no way that this is just idiocy. It's planned. It has to be, but that's a topic for another day. Quote, if you think that the Fed has been manipulated for political reasons, that makes us no better in that respect than many, many countries in this world that we would regard as not having reliable or stable financial markets. Now, that's really important right there, because I would argue that we don't have a reliable or stable financial market because an outside entity controls our money. And they've absolutely unconstitutional.
And they've been doing quantitative easing for a long time now.
A very long time.
Where they're basically printing money out of thin air.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
it goes more deep than that, but that's the short version.
But that's a great, that's a great summary. These banks, these other places can loan money they don't have. They can take you give them $100, suddenly they can get loan out $100,000 because you gave them $100, and it's insane the way that the system is set up and the way it's designed. There's going to be a straw that breaks the camel's back. It's just a matter of when.
I'm surprised we've lasted this long.
Oh, absolutely. But the Trump campaign plan obtained by the Wall Street Journal would shatter decades of institutional protections built to insulate the Fed from the political whims of the president. The plan calls for installing a Fed chair who would consult with Trump on interest rate decisions, according to the Journal, which would be a major breach of the bank's operational autonomy.
I don't get what the president should have. Maybe shouldn't have full control of the Fed. I'm going to take the middle ground.
Okay.
But should have some input.
Right. You know,
I don't get why it's a big deal to have the president have a little input.
Well, I think the argument is that we want this to be completely independent, right? That way it's not affected by the political winds of change. You know, for example, the president from this party, he knows he's going to lose the next election, so he takes the interest rate or whatever. Like, honestly, all of that stuff is a bit too esoteric for me. I don't really understand the whole thing. I don't pretend to, but at least that's my take on why they would think that way. But in my opinion, that's kind of lowbrow thinking, because what I want is a strong economy controlled by the citizens of this country. We don't have that right now.
And you think that the president would want what's best for America, so he wouldn't do that.
You would think.
You would think.
You would think. But of course, we had Obama, who was openly calling for race wars. So, I mean, the plan also calls for giving the White House more authority over Fed regulations and the Treasury Department a greater role in joint emergency lending programs, such as those deployed during the 2007-8 and 2020 recessions. So basically, the bailouts. I think that's what they're talking about. Emergency lending programs, bailouts that they did for the automotive industry and that they did through PPP loans for all these companies, forgivable.
Yeah, they
PPP
were just
loans.
throwing money out.
Yeah.
In 2020.
In 2020, man, I'm gonna put this out there, right? I was given the opportunity. I was told exactly how to go about getting a PPP loan by a friend of mine. He's like, hey, man, you know, I'm doing it. He's a business owner. His was legit, right? I want to make that perfectly clear. And his business was heavily affected by the pandemic and the lockdowns and all of that. But he's like, hey, man, you should do it for your, for your show. And I'm like, I'm not affected by the pandemic. He's like, they don't care. I'm like, no, we're not. You
made a good move because they're going after those people now.
Finally. Yeah, they're finally going after the people. But yeah, I'm like, no, I don't think I'm gonna do
good move.
Yeah. While Fed chairs and presidents will meet periodically throughout their terms, the bank and the White House always insist those discussions never touch on interest rate decisions. Fed chairs and Treasury secretaries meet more regularly, but also with boundaries around interest rate decisions. Brian Gardner, Chief Washington Policy Strategist at Stifel Investment Bank, there's a name for you, said the proposal to have the Fed chair consult with Trump is unusual, but not as alarming as other potential plans floated in the Journal article. So that's just the appetizer for the big change sandwich. Quote, Fed chairmen already consult with the Treasury Secretary, so there is a well-established communications link between an administration and the Fed, Gardner wrote. He added that, quote, a chairman cannot force an agreement and has limited, if any, recourse against opposition emanating from the committee. So it sounds like the committee is the one with the power, and the chairman cannot force an agreement. So the committee is who decides things. So it wouldn't really be that bad for Trump to be able to pick up the phone and say, yeah, I'm in favor of interest rates, because ultimately it's up to the committee. I don't know what just happened. My light just...
There it goes.
There.
I'm back.
Light. Yeah. And I'm green. Give me just a second. There we go. I think it was a timer or something. I probably accidentally got in. Some Trump allies have also floated the former president serving as an acting Fed governor himself, according to the Journal, which Gardner said, quote, would certainly be litigated, and the attempt would probably be rejected by the court.
Yeah, I think that's too extreme. I don't like that idea.
Yeah, that's might be too far. Quote, however, any effort, even if ultimately unsuccessful, could undermine investor confidence and disrupt financial markets, at least temporarily, Gardner said. And I will say that, yes, because anytime you start messing with an established system, you're going to get people who are like, oh boy, I'm out the market, I'm this, I'm that. So yeah, there's a degree.
That's not a good idea.
Right. Powell, a Republican, was renominated by Biden and can serve as Fed chair throughout the end of his term in 2026. Now, I'm going to stop right there because I think that's important. Anyone loyal to Trump, anyone that showed they would do their job and not actively obstruct the president, was replaced immediately. Anyone who played ball with the Democrats was kept. I have several names on the tip of my tongue, one of which is good old FBI boy.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
These
the first
people
person
were
that
kept. Yeah.
That's the first person I thought of.
So the fact that Powell was kept on tells me a lot. It really does. Any attempt by Trump to fire Powell or reshape the Fed board beyond the nomination process would likely end up in court and cause serious losses in financial markets. One of Trump's preferred ways to gauge his economic success along the way. In a 2019 interview, Powell said he did not believe the president has the power to fire him and that he would serve out the remainder of his term. He also stressed the importance of the Fed's autonomy and political independence, making it unlikely he would yield to Trump. Quote, the law is clear that I have a 4-year term and I fully intend to serve it, Powell said. We are directed to execute policy in a strictly non-political way, serving all Americans, and that's what we do, Powell said. I just imagine that's how he talks. I don't know. I haven't heard him in a while. He sounds like a constipated kind of guy. Powell faced relentless pressure from Trump to slash interest rates throughout 2018 as the stock market sunk and the former president sought greater leverage in trade battles with the European Union and China. The Fed was in the process of bringing interest rates up from the near zero levels set during the 2008 recession and was attempting to get ahead of inflation that never materialized.
Yeah, they claim that inflation.
Wait, yeah, I'm Hold on. I'm going to reread that again for all of you out there that are struggling to afford gas, groceries, rent, mortgage, car payments, insurance. I could go on, but I'm going to stop there. I'm going to read the entire sentence again. The Fed was in the process of bringing interest rates up from the near zero level set during the 2008 recession and was attempting to get ahead of inflation that never materialized. Okay.
Yeah, they claim that inflation never.
It never happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't happen. Don't believe your lying eyes. Believe what we tell you. When the Fed reversed course in 2019 and began cutting rates, Trump still regularly blasted the Fed for refusing to cut back down to crisis levels. The former president questioned whether the Fed chair or Chinese President Xi Jinping were more harmful to the U.S. And I'm going to be honest, I think it's a valid freaking question. Saying between these two entities, who affects the American financial market more, China or the Fed chair?
And I would say the Fed.
I would say the Fed chair. If the Fed chair is doing something not for the good of the citizens, it's going to hurt us more than China's market manipulation. Trump eventually eased up on Powell during the COVID-19 recession as the Fed slashed rates and deployed trillions of dollars in stimulus to fend off a deeper crisis. Yeah, trillions of dollars. That's true. But the former president has nonetheless insisted he would not renominate Powell and raised questions about his motivations as the Fed prepares to cut interest rates after hiking them back to 4-decade highs. Oh, so now they admit there's inflation. Quote, I can't do a Trump impression. I want to so bad, but I think it's so bad that I believe it's disrespectful, so I'm not going to do it. I think he's going to do something to probably help the Democrats, I think, if he lowers interest rates, Trump said in an interview on Fox News Business Network's Mornings with Maria in February. Trump added that he thought Powell was, quote, political.
And I think he is too.
He is. He is absolutely political. And again, the Fed has far, far more power over our markets than China. It's a legitimate question. It's a legitimate comparison. And of course, the media excoriated him. They roasted him over the fire for even thinking to question, to put forward such a question. How dare thee?
The whole reason this article came out is politics. They were trying to hurt Trump.
Absolutely. And their belief, their hope, is that by saying, oh, look what the president's doing. Look what he is going to be a dictator. So let's talk about that. For one, let's talk about the power that the Fed has. We know that the Federal Reserve is a central bank controlled by people with questionable loyalty.
Fair point.
We don't know where their loyalty lies, right? Most assume their loyalty lies to the American people. I would argue their loyalty, at best, and this is best case scenario, their loyalty lies to their financial stability.
Yep.
That's what they care about, is how much money am I or my company or my group or my buddies going to make? How do I manipulate the market? Because that's what the Fed is all about, manipulating the market with interest rate changes going up or going down based on, what's happening. It's going to drive or stifle inflation or buying trends or the growth of the dollar, things like that. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. So with that in mind, the entire point of the Fed is to manipulate the market and also to print our money. Now, when those two things are tied, I start to have questions. The big question that I have is, who is the actual entity in charge of printing money?
That's a good question. We don't know.
Right.
To be fair, it's not really printing money.
Okay.
They're buying their bond. No, they're buying bonds.
Okay.
We're basically buying our own debt.
Okay. Yeah, we're being loaned money at an interest rate that we have to pay back, right?
Yeah.
So
we're getting hit twice.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. The entire way that it's set up. And I'm going to say this. I talked to a guy that I know who worked for an investment firm, right? Like those Wells Fargo and the ones that you see all over the place. I can't think of the name right now, but Edward Jones.
Okay.
That kind of thing, right? He worked in a place like that. And I asked him, I said, our dollar used to be backed by gold. The current central bank method, why don't we go back to a gold-backed currency? And his answer was actually interesting and yet concerning, because what he said to me was, it's easier this way. And I said, what do you mean it's easier this way? Well, this is just how everything's done. And if we changed it, it would mess up. Right. So, and he also said something that as an addendum that got to the real crux of the matter, in my opinion, which is with a dollar-backed currency, a gold-backed currency, you have a finite amount.
Exactly. That's what I was just going to say.
Right. And that really was clarity for me.
Yeah.
Because the people want, the people in charge want infinite wealth. There's no number that they're happy with.
And then,
go ahead.
And then we got people like AOC. I can't remember what the theory is called, but they believe that it doesn't matter how much money you print and it's not going to affect anything because we got a machine that I can't remember I should look it up, but we have a machine and it will never affect anything.
Interesting. Okay.
there's a
I highly
leftist.
doubt that, but
I'm just
no,
I don't
I'm just
agree
saying
with it.
It exists. The theory exists. I know he's not. Yeah, just so our viewers are clear, Shawn's not saying this is fact. He's saying I've heard of this. Sounds kind of nuts. I don't agree with it, but yeah.
Let me find it.
The interesting reality is that the vast, overwhelming, I don't know the exact number, but overwhelming majority of the so-called wealth does not exist in payable form. In other words, paper money and coins. The vast majority of everyone's so-called wealth is digital. If, for example, every computer in the world stopped working, no servers, no cloud, no nothing, we would have like 4% of the wealth that allegedly exists because so much of it is digital. So while Shawn's looking that up, one of the things that I think is really important to understand is to find, number one, where did the Federal Reserve come from? Well, we know where it came from. Way back, I think the beginnings of it went back to, 1918?
What, the Fed?
Yeah.
It started in 1913.
1913.
And they waited. There's a story behind that.
Yeah.
Do you know the story? Okay. They waited until it was Christmas break in 1913 or 1912. But it was like created in 1913, but I think the vote was in 1912.
Yeah, Christmas.
They waited for everybody to leave just to get enough votes to be able to create the Federal Reserve because people were so against it.
Yes. And I believe, who was the president at the time? What was it?
Woodrow Wilson.
I was just about to say Woodrow Wilson. He had a very interesting quote to say later on. Do you know that quote?
I do not.
Let me see if I can find it. Okay, yes. Woodrow Wilson, who signed the bill, and this is actually, holy crap, it's actually on Wikipedia. This is interesting. President Wilson, here, let me get this up here.
And I found the link that I was looking for.
Okay. Let me, Okay, so here we go. Woodrow Wilson later came to regret signing the bill. Quote, "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated."
Interesting.
Yes.
I never knew that.
It is. Hold on. There's more to the quote. Let's see if I can find it. Here it is. Excellent. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world, no longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men. The very man who signed this into office regretted it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I found that fascinating. And obviously the story of the Federal Reserve is a little bit long. There's some very nefarious happenings.
I shortened it.
But you summed it up very well. They passed it in the middle of the night
On
to
Christmas
a bare
break.
minimum of representatives, pushed it through. Interestingly enough, some of the most vocal opponents of this Federal Reserve bill were on the Titanic when it sank.
Did not know that.
You didn't know that? Now this might be good for a conspiracy theory episode.
Yeah.
But yes, if you look it up, hold on. Actually, let me do this one since we're already here. I believe it was. Yeah, John Jacob Astor was on the Titanic. He was the richest passenger aboard.
Huh.
And he was one of the most vocal opponents. He had a lot of people who were on his side. And when he died, suddenly there were less opponents. Now that gets into the whole, there's a lot with the Titanic, and we'll tackle it. So that's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. Is there something you want to add at the end?
Do you want to do the link real quick about AOC believing that?
Yeah,
I send it to you.
Okay, let me bring that up. Let's at least get the name of this thing so that we can tell the viewers if you want to learn about it. Let's see here. Okay, so all right, so let's share this to where are we at? I think we're on. But there are more in the Titanic if you want to look it up. There's a small group of very, very famous.
You may just give you the name.
People. What's that? Okay, so here's this.
It's called Modern Monetary Theory.
Okay, it's called Modern Monetary Theory. And allegedly, it's not that big of a deal to be broke and print.
It says
trillions.
That governments create money, so they don't even need to borrow any. They can spend as much as they like. The only limitation should be the threat of inflation, not insufficient revenue, which is insane.
That's nuts. Yeah, that's pure crazy.
I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing it up. Once again, the name of it is
Modern Monetary Theory.
Okay. So yeah, look it up if you want your mind blown. I'm not going to cover it because her insane ramblings just get to me. But definitely, if you want to learn more about AOC and how qualified she is to determine economic policy for our country, by all means, look into this. You know what? I think we're gonna end it here for today. Thanks for joining us. A whole lot on the channel. Stay tuned, and we'll talk to you again soon. God bless you. God bless Indiana. God bless the United States of America.
If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Dion's Daily Dose. This has been Dion's Daily Dose, hosted by Dion Bergeron. Executive producers, Shawn Holgram and Michael Beebe. Copyright 2024. Dion's Daily Dose, all rights reserved.